Chosen one, there is a sentence that her mouth will never need to say because her body says it first. It is not eloquent, but it is final. It arrives as a loosening at the hinge of the jaw, as breath abandoning its habit of rationing itself, as shoulders lowering from the high perch where vigilance taught them to sleep. That sentence is the inner yes, and it lives beneath thought, beneath the biography of former hours, beneath even the stories she tells herself about wanting. When you enter, the sentence stands up quietly and takes its place. She does not argue with it. She recognizes it like a shore recognizes the moon. You do not manufacture this yes. You carry conditions under which it can reveal itself without cost. Your energy is not a password, it is a climate. Climates do not persuade. They permeate. The pace of you is what her nervous system reads first. A rhythm that asks nothing of her that it has not already asked of you. You have tamed your own urgency into service. You have taught your gaze to return ownership faster than it borrows attention. You have apprenticed your desire to reverence so that heat becomes hospitality rather than pressure. All of this becomes the barometric pressure of the room. The body is fluent in barometers. It takes one taste and makes a ruling, safe to flower. Before meaning, there is measure. She measures you in the units the body trusts, how your breath treats silence, how your posture treats space, how your words treat time. If breath is hurried, silence bruises. If posture is greedy, space shrinks other lives to fit. If words are careless with time, hope goes hungry doing math in the background. You do none of these, and so the ledgers stop rustling in her chest. Accounts close. The room, freed from the bookkeeping of suspicion, learns to sing again. The first notes are simple. An even inhale, a slower exhale. The natural rise of color to the face that no longer rehearses defenses while it listens. Your energy points like a compass by refusing to point like a finger. Fingers accuse, instruct, gather leverage. Compass' true presence does a quieter thing. It keeps north where north belongs. There is no tug in it, only orientation. She finds herself turning toward you, the way a sunflower turns toward a sun it has known through 10,000 cycles. Not because the flower worships the sun, but because following light is the flower's biology. The inner yes is not romance dressed up as reason. It is biology relieved to find a field where it may be beautiful without being charged rent. She has been sought before by energies that mistook intensity for intimacy. Those rooms were full of fireworks that demanded a cleanup crew. Your entrance needs no broom. The light you carry is not spectacle, it is daylight. Daylight clarifies. In daylight, her instincts stop making emergency checklists and start making choices. Choice is what the inner yes desires most. To say yes while remaining sovereign. To say no without having to make a case for innocence. Your steadiness makes both doors visible and dignified. Dignity is the breath of consent. When it arrives, the whole house inhales. Because your stillness is not emptiness, she is not asked to pour herself into a void. You have done the interior carpentry. The squaring of motives to the beam of conscience, the sanding of impatience until it no longer splinters touch, the oiling of old hinges so that doors can close gently and still be heard. She hears all of this before you speak. Bodies are archivists. They collect microsignals, a pause that protects a boundary rather than punishes a question, a laugh that returns warmth instead of spending it for charm, an apology that mends at the seam instead of auditioning regret. The archive opens itself and stamps the page in that quiet place behind the sternum. Approved. Her inner yes is not a surrender to your path. It is an agreement to stand fully on her own and discover that your ground does not demand robbery to make room for her feet. She steps closer, not because proximity is a prize, but because proximity feels like an increase in oxygen. Her eyes soften, and with them the old negotiations soften. The calculus of what will this cost me to be here becomes an arithmetic of gratitude, how rare it is to be allowed to be exact. Exactness is the signature of trust. It lets a voice come without courtrooms and a touch come without testimonies. The yes in her does not glitter. It glows, steady as an oil lamp kept by careful hands. You do not interrupt this glow to collect credit. The compass in her points of its own will. Your work is the ancient craft of keeping conditions. You keep time so moments do not spend themselves to prove they are alive. You keep tone so truth can travel without armor. You keep exits soft so staying never impersonates captivity. Under such keeping, nervous systems retire their sirens. Then, and only then, the yes becomes audible even to the mind. It will write you no psalms. It will draft no vows. It will do something braver. It will stand in the room, unhidden, unhurried, unhurt by its own clarity, and say, I recognize this north. Later, when you are elsewhere and the daily errands resume their chorus, the inner yes does not collapse into doubt. Doubt belongs to stories that have to keep selling themselves to survive. The yes you helped her meet does not sell anything. It simply shows where the light enters. She will take that light to rooms you will never see, and the compass will hold because it was calibrated to conditions, not personalities. This is the highest compliment to your presence, that it made you less necessary by making her more free. The yes remains because you never tried to own what it named. You only kept north where it belongs and let her body do what it has waited all its life to do. Trust without debt. Chosen one, memory is not only a museum of images, it is a muscle in the dark, learning the shape of what kept it alive. Her soul remembers you before chronology grants permission to call it memory. It remembers the pattern, the pressure, the moral temperature. In other lives, or this one, in quiet rooms where the language was not yet human, it learned to recognize certain weathers as home. Your energy arrives bearing that weather, clearer than flattery, warmer than conquest, steadier than a promise trying to be believed, and the muscle in the dark relaxes as if it had found its old posture after years of sleeping in a chair. You do not activate this remembrance with biography or brilliance. You awaken it with coherence. Coherence is what happens when the instruments of a life agree on the key. Your attention, your appetite, your ambition, your rest, they play the same song. It is not loud, but it is impossible to ignore if the ear has ever known true music. Her body is that ear. It knows when the melody is honest. It knows because honest melody never asks the listener to shrink to fit the song. Dishonest songs are catchy and cruel. Coherence is quieter. It frees. She did not misplace the compass. It was trained to distrust itself by rooms that demanded that fear be named love. Her soul remembers otherwise. It remembers the acheless closeness of beings that do not harvest one another. It remembers the holy rudeness of truth spoken without knives. It remembers the rare kindness of leaving cleanly enough that tomorrow does not inherit debt from today. When you stand near, you match the archive. It is not magic, it is fidelity. Fidelity to the practices that made you legible to yourself, and therefore legible to others who long for a map that does not lie. The memory is old enough to be gentle. It does not drag her toward you by spectacle. It guides by recognition. Here is a field that will not charge you to breathe. Here is a door that opens both ways. Here is a lamp kept at a human height so faces can be fully seen. The body, receiving these coordinates, revises its posture. The jaw, which once clamped words to keep them from being taxed, begins to trust conversation again. The eyes, which once scanned for exits because staying was expensive, begin to focus on the person rather than the perimeter. The hands, which once rehearsed apologies for wanting, begin to want without rehearsals. Memory is a returning, not a rush. There is a mercy in how your energy addresses what remembers. You do not demand that the mind produce citations before you treat the soul as if it were right. You let the nervous system lead and the mind follow. This is not an anti-intellectualism. It is correct sequencing. The mind does its best math when the body is not bracing. You lower the cost of bracing by doing what you always do. Govern your heat, keep your words small and sturdy, refuse the cheap performance of mystery as evasion. Let boundaries be architecture instead of negotiation. Each of these is a familiar landmark to memory. Memory relaxes when the map matches the terrain. She will test the terrain, not out of suspicion, but out of respect for what she remembers. Respect interrogates the physical world on behalf of the unseen. Will you still be kind when convenience is not a witness? Will you still be clear when advantage is available to the opaque? Will you still be here when being here is not a story anyone celebrates? You answer with continued weather. The pattern does not break to chase applause. You do not turn winter into summer to impress. You keep winter kind and summer humble, and in doing so you teach time how to be trusted again. Your presence restores to her a precious faculty, the ability to differentiate heat from hunger. Hunger impersonates heat when it wants to turn bodies into fuel for its myth. Heat, under vow, is a hearth. Memory knows the difference. You are a hearth. By you she warms, she cooks meaning, she dries the old clothes of a storm. She does not vanish into your flame. She returns home carrying fire that does not burn the threshold as it enters. The soul's memory learns this quickly, how to take what is offered without acquiring a bill, how to give what is true without acquiring a deficit. Mutual solvency is a love story the body never gets tired of telling. There will be nights when a younger memory wakes, the one trained by rooms that equated urgency with devotion. It will suggest speed, spectacle, proofs of heat that leaves smoke. You do not argue with that younger memory. You host it. You let the hours slow until the part of her that remembers home can re-enter the room and take her rightful chair. Your stillness becomes the corridor she walks through to get back to herself. In this way, you are not a destination. You are a path through a noisy house back to the quiet room where wisdom waits. The compass points not because you are magnetic, but because you are aligned. The soul, once it remembers the way, becomes generous with absence. You can be gone without collapsing what you helped her rebuild. This is not indifference, it is maturity. What is inwardly installed does not require constant external confirmation. She will carry your weather into meetings with strangers and choose seats that face faces rather than exits. She will answer invitations by asking the questions your presence taught her to ask. Will my breath be allowed its full length? Will my no be treated as architecture and not as a wall to climb? Will repair outrank theater when friction finds us? Where the answer is yes, she steps in. Where it is no, she bows out with kindness and keeps her sky. When you return, the reunion will not feel like a feast thrown to prove abundance. It will feel like a kitchen that has continued to be cared for. Sharp knives, clean boards, a pot already simmering with something simple. You bring bread because that is what people carry to places that once fed them. She brings salt because salt is what keeps flavors honest. You work side by side in the old, new weather. No audition, no legend, everything necessary within reach. Memory, satisfied, stops acting like a siren and becomes what it was always meant to be. A compass that can rest because north can be trusted. And if someone asks her later why she trusted you, she will struggle to produce a thesis because the proof lives deeper than sentences live. She may say the room breathed right. She may say my shoulders forgot how to patrol. She may say I remembered myself in his weather. All of these are true, and none of them capture the whole. The whole is this. Chosen one, your energy kept the world pointed the way her soul knew it should be pointed. And because you did, the compass within her stopped spinning. It's settled. It still's there now, not because you hold it, but because you refuse to move the north. And in that refusal you gave her back what love is supposed to give first, direction without debt. Chosen one, safety is not a speech. It is a physics. Bodies obey it the way tides obey the moon. When you enter, the room remembers gravity the way a child remembers the shape of a parent's hand, without consulting a single sentence. There's a settling that happens first, too subtle for applause. The air stops hurrying, the clock stops panting, the perimeter stops auditioning for importance. She feels this before she names it. Naming is slow, knowing is immediate. Her shoulders, long employed as sentries on a wall that never clocked out, step down from their watch and find a chair. The chair is made of your steadiness. You didn't bring it in your arms, you built it with your behavior. Safety, in your keeping, is never a bargain. It is not the conditional comfort offered by charm, not the special access pass that expires the moment admiration runs late. Your safety is infrastructural. It is woven into how you hold silence without turning it into pressure, how you let language arrive at the pace of meaning instead of the pace of appetite, how your gaze blesses rather than brands. She recognizes, at the level where ribs talk to breath, that nothing in you needs to feed on her to feel large. The body trusts absence of appetite long before it trusts abundance of praise. Praise can be counterfeit, restraint cannot. You move like someone who understands thresholds. You do not rush doorways. You linger at edges and let the moment finish its sentence before you add yours. This is not hesitation, it is honor. Doorways are where most harm happens, too fast, too loud, too certain of itself. You refuse that economy. You are practiced in the slow grammar of consent, the one with commas, with pauses, with the kind of punctuation that allows the paragraph to keep its dignity. Her nervous system reads punctuation better than poetry. When the commas are real, she speaks in whole thoughts. When the pauses are respected, she brings truth that doesn't need armor. Truth without armor is not a vulnerability to exploit. It is a trust to guard. Your presence takes up that job without needing applause for doing it. Safety in you feels like calibration, not control. Control rearranges furniture while pretending it's doing you a favor. Calibration checks if the floor is level so cups won't slide. You calibrate with small, unfancy rituals. You show up when you said you would, and you do not spend the moment proving that you did. You state what you can carry, and you do not disguise appetite as ability. You close a conversation cleanly so tomorrow doesn't inherit a factory of unsaid things. These details lower the cost of being human in your company. Lower costs make generosity affordable. With affordability restored, she can give what is true without paying in regret and receive what is offered without paying in suspicion. Fear wants to be flattered into sleep. You do not flatter it. You let it be awake, and you give it a chair in the corner where it can see the exits. You do not perform invincibility to spook it into silence. You acknowledge that you are a man with weather and that your weather will be kept, not inflicted. Kept weather is how rage forgets the path to spectacle and grief remembers the path to water. Your kept weather teaches her body that storms, even when they visit, do not get to rewrite the blueprints of the house. When blueprints remain legible, guests like joy and desire arrive without fear of being evicted mid-supper. Fear learns, in such architecture, that vigilance can become observation. Observation costs less. With the refund, life buys color. Notice too how you handle heat. So many have burned her under the flag of passion and then tried to invoice her for the ashes. Your heat is not a wildfire in search of a headline. It's a hearth under oath. Oath is what turns flame into service. You do not use heat to interrogate, you use it to warm. In that warmth, speech softens and reveals the truth beneath the story, what she actually wants, what she actually fears, what she actually refuses to trade again. You do not pounce on these disclosures to secure advantage. You file them in the only cabinet that matters, the one labeled Protect. Protection in your practice is quiet. It doesn't publish minutes or campaign for recognition. It shows up in the unremarkable miracle of nothing bad happened here. Safety also reveals itself in the way you treat distance. Distance that postures as power is a cheap theater trick. Distance that gathers provisions is stewardship. You step back without turning absence into punishment. You return without converting presence into leverage. This steadiness writes a new policy in her bones. Love is not a scarcity economy. She stops over-tipping attention to keep it from leaving. She stops undercharging her own boundaries to keep the peace. The room breathes evenly. Even breath is an announcement without sound. You are free to be whole. When conflict enters, as it must anywhere reality is welcomed, you do not escalate to prove you care. You reduce, refine, repair. Reduction looks like distinguishing the seam from the fabric. Refinement looks like telling time so a wound is not asked to heal faster than tissue can knit. Repair looks like apology measured in changed behavior, not megaphones. She watches this, and her guard learns a new job description. It stops being a soldier and starts being a groundskeeper. The groundskeeper oils hinges, keeps paths clear, trims back what would block the light. In that maintenance, the extraordinary becomes ordinary. Two people arguing without becoming opponents, two bodies near without negotiating for oxygen, two lives aligned enough to disagree without making a spectacle of harm. Your gravity has another mercy. It does not collapse the orbit of her life into yours. Gravity that collapses is possession with nicer vocabulary. Your gravity organizes. It lets her keep her seasons, her separate sky, her other rooms where you are not the protagonist. Organization prevents collisions. It also makes conjunctions possible. Moments where two full lives pass close enough to exchange light without eclipsing. In those conjunctions, she does not feel owned. She feels oriented. Orientation is the deepest relief of a body that has had to navigate by warning signs. Warnings kept her alive. Orientation lets her live. This is why she leans toward you without doubt. Not because you cast a spell, but because you keep a standard. Standards feel like the old laws of a world that remembers how to be kind. Doors that open both ways, tables set at human height, flames that warm without demanding tribute, exits that don't slam, returns that don't perform. She does not need to figure you out. She needs only to feel that the math of being here adds up. It does. The sum is livable. The product is peace. The remainder is desire cleaned of its panic, free to choose pace instead of price. So your safety is not an advertisement, it is a habitat. Habitats don't convince, they support. In a true habitat, instincts return to their rightful jobs. Her intuition stops acting like a security guard and starts acting like an artist again, painting her hours with the colors panic had rationed. She will always remember the first time your gravity let her set down her armor without losing her edge. Edge kept and armor shed. That is the gospel her body will preach about you, long after language has run out of clever ways to say thank you. Chosen one, truth is not merely a fact, it is a field orientation. It does not shout directions from a tower. It sets north where north belongs and lets everything else discover itself in relation. You carry that north, not because you decided to, but because you refuse to move it. A man who will not move the north so his legend can look larger becomes a landmark in a world of neon signs. Her body trusts landmarks. Neon flickers and flatters, but it cannot be navigated by fog. Landmarks remain. Your truth begins with how you relate to your own interior. You have stopped outsourcing meaning to circumstances. You have stopped demanding that other people supply you with a self. You do the unglorious rites that keep a compass honest. You calibrate by solitude so you're not governed by applause, by sleep so your warmth doesn't become glare, by work that returns your respect to you so you don't borrow it from bodies, by prayer or quiet that keeps appetite under governance. Calibration is invisible, but its absence is always obvious. She senses its presence before she ever hears your position on anything. Positions are cheap. Calibration is expensive, and therefore rare. Truth in you is not weaponized. Sharpness is only useful when it is also placed. You place it carefully, naming the seam rather than condemning the garment, specifying the behavior without indicting the soul, offering measurements instead of metaphors when repair is due. This is the difference between righteousness and theater. Theater performs clarity so it can win. Righteousness practices clarity so it can love. Around practiced clarity, her mind stops preparing rebuttals and begins preparing requests. Requests are the commerce of a healthy life. This is what I can carry. This is what I cannot. This is what I fear. This is what I want. Your truth receives these parcels without sending a bill disguised as approval. You refuse the counterfeit truth of omniscience. I don't know is a phrase your mouth can carry without shame. You do not hide ignorance behind smoke and myth. You let not knowing be a clean room where curiosity can work. In that room, her intelligence stretches out again. Many rooms have taught her to shrink it so men would not feel eclipsed. Your north does not dim to flatter anyone's insecurity. It simply keeps pointing. In that steady pointing, she has room to be brilliant without being punished, and to be unsure without being patronized. Being brilliant and unsure in the same hour is how real progress is made. You are not threatened by the complexity, because your compass does not need the weather to be simple to be true. Truth also arranges boundaries. Boundaries built on fear are prison fences. Boundaries built on truth are bridges with load limits clearly posted. You live by posted limits. You don't make her read your mind to avoid collapse. You don't test love by setting traps. You publish your thresholds and you honor hers. The honor is mutual and mechanical. Bridges do not care if you find them romantic. They care that you drive at a safe weight and speed. In that engineering, travel becomes trustworthy. Trustworthy travel turns distance into a feature instead of a threat. She learns she can go far and still be found. She learns she can come close and not be consumed. Because your compass is moral and not performative, it handles desire with clean hands. You name what you want with sentences that do not recruit guilt as leverage. You hear her no as information, not as opposition. You treat yes as a climate, not as a trophy. Climate loves to be revisited and re-verified. Trophies gather dust and demand guarding. In climate, desire turns generous. It becomes interested in what keeps both sovereigns whole. Her body, reading this, steps out of the courtroom and into the orchard. Courtrooms ask for proof. Orchards ask for time. You give time, and time answers with fruit. You are careful with conclusions. Many would rather be right quickly than faithful slowly. You are willing to let mystery remain a neighbor to clarity. You don't inquisition a moment until it produces a confession that fits your thesis. You hold the door while reality enters with all its luggage, and you do triage by usefulness. What needs naming now? What needs warmth? What needs rest? What needs to be left exactly as it is? This triage does not look heroic, which is why it almost always works. She watches your patience, how it refuses to turn uncertainty into a spectacle, and finds her own impatience losing its arguments. Impatience cannot compete with the north that never moves. Your truth leaves residue only where it should, in memory as guidance, not in the soul as debt. After your conversations, she does not pace, drafting closing arguments. She sets the kettle on. The body chooses tea when it hasn't been recruited into a war. Steam curls up like a small domestic benediction. You were seen without being sold. This is the sign of a good compass. The day that follows it feels usable. Usability is underrated because it is unglamorous. But usable days are what keep people alive without turning them into performers. There is a way you practice farewell that proves your truth more than any speech. You close the door softly. Soft doors are engineered, not accidental. A soft door says, the hinge was checked, the frame is square, the weather strip is intact. This tells her future that it will not be taxed by the past in the form of slammed echoes. She will remember this the next time an ending is needed. She will imitate you without thinking, which is what real teaching looks like. The hands know what to do before the mouth finds words. In public, under lights that reward performance, your compass does not rewrite itself to suit the crowd. You decline applause that would require you to betray the quiet covenants you keep in private. She notices the refusal, and her own compass steadies by reflection. Reflection is how truth multiplies. It is not a recruitment drive. It is a contagion of coherence. One person refusing to move the north makes it easier for another to do the same, and soon the room contains a weather that outlasts mood. Mood is loud. Weather is faithful. You will be tested by the ache of speed, by the glamour of ambiguity, by the temporary power that comes from speaking louder than your certainty warrants. The chosen ones are tempted by these things precisely because their gifts make them plausible. Resist them not to be pure, but to remain useful. Utility is the noblest aspiration of truth. A true compass wants boats to arrive, pilgrims to rest, children to learn a sky they can trust. Your truth will be unromantic on certain days. Be unromantic anyway. Romance without reliability is a storm in a costume. What her body trusts, without doubt, is that your truth prefers mercy to victory, precision to drama, presence to legend. It sees that you would rather be a place to stand than a view to admire. Views are lovely and disorienting. Places to stand change lives quietly. And so, when she orients to you, it is not to kneel, it is to walk without sway. She does not move toward you because you have captured her. She moves because the way you keep north returns her to herself. The miracle is not that you point the way. The miracle is that beside you she remembers she knew the way all along and can be trusted to follow it. Chosen one, the body answers before the oracle speaks. It answers in micro-releases and quiet renegotiations, in the way a room subtly changes when a window is cracked open, and the air realizes it does not have to work so hard to be air. Your energy does not bang on the door of her attention. It takes the job the door always wanted to have and simply holds the frame square. In the square of that frame, breath finds its rightful arithmetic. Inhale no longer arrives like a courier running uphill. Exhale no longer dribbles out as if permission must be paid for. The rhythm becomes what rhythm was before suspicion taught it theatrics. Arrive, depart, return, repeat. There are old reflexes in her that have served as unpaid staff for too many seasons. The jaw that locked when rooms turned unsafe, now learning from your presence that language can walk out with its shoes on and return with its dignity intact. The shoulders that impersonated battlements, now discovering that your steadiness builds shelter without charging them masonry. The rib cage that trained itself to be a vault, now reminded by your quiet coherence that hearts are not stolen when sight is reverent. You do not negotiate with these reflexes. You do something smaller and therefore larger. You stay legible. Legibility is the mercy the nervous system trusts. It is the difference between a hallway lit by a lamp at human height and a hallway haunted by flickering neon promising an exit it cannot keep. She has experienced energies that perform like sirens, loud, urgent, persuasive, always insisting the destination is right now and the ticket price is silence. Your energy behaves like the bell that rings the hour in a monastery. It does not hurry the day, it names it. It does not demand devotion, it organizes it. Under such a bell, her sensory gates recalibrate. Sound returns to proportions that music can use. Light returns to tones that faces can live in. Touch returns to a vocabulary that does not require translation fees. The reflexes that once patrolled for trespassers retire to the kind of useful watch that notices rain so windows can be closed and notices sun so sheets can be dried.